Well, Louise Jones is Head of Intelligence at Defence Analysts, McKenzie Intelligence Services. Louise, welcome back to the programme. For those of us who are not military experts, what is depleted uranium used for in warfare, and what is its key purpose?
So just to understand that depleted uranium comes from the process to make nuclear fuel, where uranium ore is processed and you get enriched uranium, which then goes on to be used as nuclear fuel in the nuclear industry. And then what you have left is depleted uranium, which has got very low radioactivity and of a different type to that in enriched uranium. Now, depleted uranium has a property in that it is exceedingly dense metal. Much denser than many metals such as lead. And it's actually that property, which has nothing to do with the fact that it was used for its uranium, means that it's actually very effective to use in a warhead, because for the size and weight of the metal, you have a very effective penetrative weapon to be used against anti-armor or anti-tank. And that's why it's used. It's nothing to do with any small radioactive components that it may have.
OK, that understood. This is still a high-risk substance, isn't it? I mean, what are the dangers of depleted uranium for humans in the vicinity when it explodes and the environment?
So, obviously, it's very effective at piercing armour, and it is also flammable. So what it can do is cause an incendiary effect when it does pierce a tank, for example. So it's very effective, but then all anti-tank weaponry will have that effect. Now, whilst it does have very low radioactivity, it's of a kind that normally can't penetrate human skin. So just being in the vicinity of it whilst it's part of a warhead that hasn't been used or just simply nearby doesn't really have any discernible effect. The issues may come from where it is then becomes present in aerosols after an explosion. So, for example, in the vicinity after it has been used on a target. There's also some discussion about the effects after an explosion on soil or the nearby groundwater, and those after effects are slightly less clear. But, you know, this shouldn't be considered in any way similar to a radioactive weapon. The UN doesn't classify it as anywhere near the threshold for a nuclear or chemical weapon. And any effects it might do, if you do happen to ingest it as an aerosol effect, for example, is that it will do things like raise the risk of cancer, unless you ingest it in very large quantities, in which case it will cause more immediate effects. So really, we shouldn't understand depleted uranium in the context of a nuclear or a chemical type weapon. Really, it's a conventional weapon that has some characteristics of very low radioactivity.
There's nothing new about its use, is there? I mean, it's been used before in the former Yugoslavia and during the Gulf War. I mean, what do we learn from its use there?
So, yeah, it was used as far back as the first Gulf War in 1990, and it was used in the invasion of Iraq in 2003 as well. It's been a very common part of both the American and the UK, British armoured warheads. Really, and Russia also has access to this technology. Really, any country that has access to nuclear fuel processing can make depleted uranium. So it's really nothing new. It's a very standard part of warheads for the UK and US. So really, the fact that it's being sent is sort of as soon as we started to commit weapons platforms like Challenger 2, really it was almost for granted that we would send the warheads with it that have depleted uranium. So really in line with expectations of the current level of support to Ukraine.
And what might its use mean for the war in Ukraine?
So really it should be understood as part of the provision of the whole package of advanced tanks, advanced artillery and rocket systems. So really taken by itself, it really won't make any difference per se, but really should be understood as part of that wider package of sending Challenger 2 tanks, for example. And that will really help the Ukrainians as these platforms, as their troops get training and these platforms start to be used on the front line, which is still some way away yet.
We see you every so often on this programme and ask you the same sad question in a sense, a sit rep on where this conflict is going. We're now in March, we're in spring essentially. Where are we and where is it going and when will it end?
So, unfortunately, we've seen some really heavy fighting in around the city of Bakhmut, which has had a very high casualty rate, and that has been very sad to see. It's sort of been interesting from a military perspective in that the city of Bakhmut is not necessarily militarily important, really what it has shown is that both Ukraine and Russia are quite happy simply just to be fighting. They're trying to wear each other down, both in terms of munitions, will to fight, and soldiers. And really where we'll see is that Russia has, bit by bit, started to close off Bakhmut, and I would expect to see Russians complete takeover of that city within the coming months. The Ukrainians will very carefully pick when they decide to withdraw, as they did, for example, in Mariupol, which is a similar one where the Russians were able to encircle. And unfortunately, what this will mean for the wider war is that I really don't think that there is a clear pathway to resolution for either side. For Ukraine, they have repeatedly said, repeatedly committed that they do not see a path to a ceasefire, that doesn't see the return of all the land that Russia has captured so far. And really what also Ukraine will be looking for is guarantees that were there to be a ceasefire called, that Russia wouldn't use that to rearm, refuel and reman their forces. So unfortunately, we're still very much in the military phase of this conflict, and I think we shall see, unfortunately, high casualty rates on the news for some months to come.
Louise Jones, thank you very much. Louise Jones, Head of Intelligence and Defence Analyst, McKenzie Intelligence Services.